Welcome to the MAGA Minute. It's been a huge week here at the White House, and let's go over the wins President Trump delivered on behalf of you, the American people. On immigration, illegal migrant encounters between the ports of entry are down nearly 87%. On the economy, President Trump laid out a plan to establish a sovereign wealth fund to better invest the more than $5 trillion in assets held by the United States. He also proposed tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico and China, and those tariffs were swiftly paused after our allies agreed to step up and address these issues. We are streamlining USAID into the State Department. President Trump signed a historic executive order to ban men in women's sport. Lastly, President Trump is already making our military strong again. Army recruitment in the month of December, with the anticipation of President Trump's return to the Oval Office, hit a 15-year high. We'll see you for next week's MAGA Minute.
The shutdown.
So Senator Warren, why are you so afraid of transparency? Why are you bothered by the fact that Elon Musk is attempting to expose all of this fraudulent spending? What is that about? What is the problem here? What is the problem with transparency? Do not touch me. Do not touch me. Senator Warren, I just want to answer a question. How did you get a $12 million net worth on a $200,000 salary in Congress? How did you do that?
Excuse me.
How did you do that? You can keep trying to block my camera. We're on a public sidewalk, so get off of me. So you don't want to answer that question. What is it about DOGE that's such a problem to you? You just elbowed me, Senator. I got that on camera.
Excuse us. Thank you.
Transparency is your enemy.
Democrats are acting like cheating boyfriends right now. I'm sorry, but somebody's got to say it. I'm independent. I think there's good ideas on both sides. There's bad ideas on both sides. But what this DOGE audit is reminding me of is like a girl taking her boyfriend's phone and like hiding in the bathroom. And the Democrats are just banging on the door. And they're like, you are invading my privacy. You can't go through my phone. And Elon Musk is like, yes, I can. I can see what you've been up to. And then every time Musk comes out of the bathroom, he's like, look, see what you did? They just turn it around and they're like, you invaded my privacy. This was your fault. You broke my trust.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So once again, we got to talk about Democrats boohoo whining and crying because they've now taken to the streets to protest the latest actions of the Trump administration involving DOGE and getting rid of some of these bureaucratic, unnecessary and redundant government agencies that, quite honestly, their functions could be brought under a different institution, right? And you can still kind of do the same things. But some of these organizations have gotten so big, these entities have gotten so big that they're not being held accountable by anybody, right? And that lack of accountability is what the American people don't like about these agencies, but what Democrats are fighting to protect, because not having accountability allows these independent agencies and organizations to fund pet projects that Democrats like and end up getting paid to liberals, okay, to push a woke agenda. Like, for example, when you talk about the Pentagon paying millions of dollars to essentially have conversations about DEI.
Is an opportunity to have a difficult conversation when it comes to DEIA. There is an avatar, and behind that avatar, there is a trained individual who is going to have the conversation. He or she will be able to either elevate the difficulty of the conversation or back down and understand. The time that we're living in is we have conversations that are difficult, specifically dealing with people or differences of opinions. It's important for us as individuals and leaders and service members to have these conversations and allow us to practice having these conversations that are often very difficult to have. This is for airmen, this is for guardians, this is for civilians of all ranks enlisted in officer.
Elon Musk has accused the Federal Emergency Management Agency of diverting funds meant for American disaster relief. According to Musk, FEMA sent a staggering $59 million to luxury hotels in New York City to house illegal migrants, a move he says violates the president's executive order and is a gross misuse of taxpayer money. Musk claimed that his Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, recently uncovered the funds and vowed that a clawback demand will be made to recoup the money. This controversy comes as the Trump administration intensifies efforts to overhaul FEMA. Last month, President Trump signed an executive order establishing a council to review the agency amid concerns over political bias. The new directive calls for the council's first meeting within 90 days and requires a report of its findings within 180 days. Trump has been long critical of FEMA, arguing that the agency bungles emergency relief efforts and should either be fundamentally reformed or even dismantled. He has previously denounced FEMA's performance, asserting that federal disaster aid should be given directly to states rather than managed by an inefficient agency. Funding for FEMA has soared in recent years following several high-profile weather disasters.
Yeah. So again, that's what Democrats are fighting to protect, right? They're fighting to protect the wasteful spending of millions, billions of taxpayer dollars on things that don't really produce anything or help the American people, but they help get liberals paid, right? The liberal activists, they get paid for this type of stuff, okay? And that scheme is now over under the Trump administration, and this is what they're really upset about. Now, what we have to talk about here today in regards to the latest Democrat Party meltdown, because they have taken to the streets and they are protesting over Russell Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, taking control of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was essentially the brainchild of Elizabeth Warren and the Obama administration after the 2008 financial crisis. This entity was created in order to protect consumers from the big banks. And now Democrats are upset because the Trump administration, led by Russell Vought, is basically saying, you know what? This agency is redundant and we don't really need it. Also, there's some questions about the funding of this agency because it's not actually funded via the regular appropriations process. It's actually funded by the Federal Reserve, which calls into questions about the constitutionality of an agency that basically has little oversight, unlimited funding, okay, because it's funded by the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is the only entity that has some control over the funding of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And it is also controlled by one director, okay? And Republicans have criticized this agency due to the fact that despite its mission to protect consumers, there are questions about whether or not they have actually been effective at doing that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of this agency. But again, more so the questions about the actual funding mechanism and why is it that you have an agency like this that exists that seems to be removed from any type of oversight or accountability. And this is what Democrats, this is the latest protest that they have in which they're losing their minds over President Trump reining in this organization. Take a look.
Every time you hear DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, you just remember it is the Department of Government Evil. Over. This will be a congressional fight, a constitutional fight, a legal fight, and on days like this, a street fight. Yes.
Wow, wow, wow. Look at this crowd. Elon Musk, where are you? Bring your ass over here so you can see who's here and what we're doing. We're not afraid of you. We know that you are the co-president now of the United States of America. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to follow very closely what he's doing and how he has done it. First of all, we're here at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What is it? This is so important. Prior to this being organized in the Dodd-Frank reforms, consumers didn't have any place to really file complaints. They didn't have anywhere to go when the biggest banks in America was ripping them off. The student loans were being undermined. They didn't have any place to go. Why does Elon Musk want to get rid of all of this? Because he's a thief. He's a gangster. He brings his billionaire friends along with him because they think that they can take over this country. And Trump has said, you give me enough money, you can have it.
For every person who wants to buy a home without getting scammed, this fight is your fight. For every family that doesn't want to get put out on the street in an illegal foreclosure, this is your fight. For every student who wants to borrow money to go to school without getting defrauded, this is your fight. For every member of our military who doesn't want to get trapped by some sleazy payday lender, say it with me, this is your fight. For every person who borrows money to buy a car and doesn't want to get trapped in the fine print, this is your fight. For every American.
Elizabeth Warren have said that by freezing it, it's giving big banks and giant corporations the green light to scam families.
Pocahontas, the faker. That was set up to destroy people. She used that as her little personal agency to go around and destroy people. And she's a fake. Just like she said she was an Indian, and she wasn't an Indian. You have more Indian blood in you than she has. She went to college based on the fact that she was an Indian. She got jobs based on the fact that she was an Indian. She's a fake. That was set up to destroy some very good people, and it worked. I mean, it worked. A lot of great people. I'll tell you, before I ever heard the term, people would come up to me in the Midwest and areas that say, "Sir, I'm being destroyed by them." They use that to destroy people. She's a nasty woman. She's a really nasty woman, despite her phony beer commercial. We did the right thing. That was a very important thing to get rid of. And it was also a waste. I mean, number one, it was a bad group of people running it, but it was also a waste. If you looked at when she really ran it, wow, that was a vicious group of people. They really destroyed a lot of people.
And you can confirm it's your goal is to have it totally eliminated, the agency?
Say, yeah, because we're trying to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, Democrats are going to kick, scream, and cry about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau basically being closed by Mr. Russell Vought. And they're going to pretend as if the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is nothing but pros, right? There are no cons to having an agency like this that basically is unaccountable to anybody, right? Because Congress designed it to be that way. No, there's no cons whatsoever, right? This is all positive.
It's interesting, Lance, because this agency that we're talking about right now has, over the years, returned nearly $20 billion to American consumers. So how is shuttering it good for Americans?
Well, where did that $20 billion come from? Fining financial institutions, suing small businesses out there. That's their record of what they've done. I mean, that's some would argue that they've increased prices. That's what their whole purpose is, to fine financial institutions and all of that good stuff. So I think that was
actually guardrails. They're actually what the federal government does. They act as guardrails to make sure that actually when they're trying to defraud the public, that there is a federal. This is literally what they were there to create it to do.
They were suing small businesses in Chicago and taking them to task for over minor stuff. I mean,
illegal stuff or just minor stuff?
Minor stuff. That is a fact.
But that's what you're saying. It's minor stuff. But they've also managed to protect.
Take the money away from financial institutions. That's what they were built on. This was designed and created by Elizabeth Warren, one of the most far-left senators in the country. And so, yeah, absolutely.
So you're actually like just yay banks, yay big business. Let's have no oversight whatsoever. Is that?
Well, no one's saying there's no oversight, but I'm saying if Wolf's talking about $20 billion, where is the $20 billion coming from?
Who's supposed to have the oversight, Lance? Who's supposed to have the oversight?
That's what we have a government for, but that we can have a government have oversight in this country.
If you get rid of the institutions that do it, then who's supposed to have the oversight, Lance?
So we'll just create new agencies, and they'll take $20 billion out of our financial institutions. That's what you're suggesting that we do.
No, so the plan is what, to create new agencies?
Look, there's obviously a
So Donald Trump is now in the government, right? So he is the federal government. So if you're suggesting there should be no oversight, then what is going to take its place?
What are you talking about? No oversight. I'm discussing where the $20 billion is coming from. It's coming from financial institutions, which has a direct impact on people who have funds at those banks. That's absolutely what happens. That's absolutely what this agency's been doing. There is obviously a difference of opinion in terms of this agency and what it should be doing and who's holding what accountable based on the Trump administration. And yeah, they're trying to shut it down. And again, this is yet another fight that they're ready to have.
Now, I'm gonna let you guys decide whether or not you think that this is a good thing or a bad thing. I personally believe that, especially when it comes to regulating the financial markets and financial institutions, there are pros and there's cons, okay? And there is no real solution. It's just about the trade-offs that you're willing to accept. So when it comes to arguments in favor of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Proponents claim that it protects consumers from predatory practices, like, for example, cracking down on deceptive fees, hidden fees, and fraudulent financial products. It holds big banks and corporations accountable by issuing fines and penalties against companies that violate consumer protection laws. It enforces mortgage and lending regulations to avoid reckless spending, like the 2008 crisis. It requires disclosure of credit card fees, loan terms, and financial agreements. It has returned over $19.7 billion to harm consumers. Again, that number will be tossed out there a lot by Democrats. Offers a complaint system and financial education resources, prevents large financial institutions from using unfair practices that harm smaller banks and credit unions. Now, when it comes to cons, arguments against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, first and foremost, we already talked about this, the lack of accountability. It operates independently from Congress and is funded by the Federal Reserve, limiting oversight. Regulatory overreach. It imposes strict regulations that increase compliance costs for businesses, especially small banks. So when you talk about those overdraft fees that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has essentially pressured banks to minimize or to eliminate in some cases, well, only thing the banks do is that they just add the fees into other places, right? Into other products and services. They'll get the money somehow, some way. Even if they're not doing it through overdraft fees, they do it through other ways as well too. It reduces access to credit. Tougher lending rules make it harder for low-income and subprime borrowers to get loans. Now, this is one that I find to be fascinating because so-called people of color who complain about access to loans to start businesses and things of that nature, well, you can kind of thank the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for that because they have imposed regulations that make it so banks have to make sure that you have a certain set of requirements to be deemed eligible for credit or loans, okay? Like, for example, you have to have a certain debt to income ratio. Again, this is thanks to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that keeps a lot of so-called minorities from gaining access to capital. Again, pros and cons, okay? That's what I'm trying to tell you. They impose heavy restrictions on payday lending, which people argue removes emergency borrowing options for those with poor credit. Compliance costs lead to higher fees for bank accounts, mortgages, and credit cards. Mortgage rules have increased wait times and costs for home buyers. The agency's priorities shift depending on the administration and power, leading to inconsistent enforcement. Yeah, so basically in a nutshell, I personally think that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has pros and cons, right? It's not all pros, which Democrats will argue, but it's not all cons as well either, right? I think that personally, there are some functions of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that we definitely need to protect consumers, like from fraud. But at the same time, we have the Federal Reserve, the Federal Trade Commission, the OCC, the FDIC, the Department of Justice, and HUD, right? We have plenty of government institutions that could take on some of the responsibilities of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I think that's kind of what the argument is for shutting it down, is that it's redundant. We have other agencies that can do the job of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And it would probably be more efficient to have some of these other agencies take on the task. And furthermore, I think that an agency like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau should have some accountability and oversight. I just think the funding mechanism in and of itself is enough to reevaluate it. But Congress doesn't want to do that. And that's the part about this that really stuns me. Congress is upset that President Trump is doing something that they refuse to do. Congress has delegated a lot of power and authority to the executive branch and to these unregulated, unaccountable entities, these organizations, because they don't want to do it, right? They don't want to do their jobs. And they're mad that the branch of the government that they've delegated a lot of power to, by the way, is actually doing something that Congress should have done a long time ago, which was to rein in this organization. So with that being said, President Trump's approval rating continues to climb despite the protests and the boohoo whining crying from Democrats. And this has sent CNN into shock, right? They're stunned about how Trump's approval rating just continues to climb despite the backlash. So without further ado, let's get into it.
It's been 21 days now since President Trump took office, wasting no time issuing sweeping orders to dramatically reshape the federal government. This is a much more organized and effective start to his second term as compared to his first. CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton joining us now to run the numbers. Harry, hello. Good to see you.
Hello.
We're getting some new information about how Americans view President Trump's, how he's doing his job.
Yeah, so, CBS News, YouGov came out with a poll earlier today that had him on the positive side of the ledger, and I decided to average all the polls. And you know what? The average of the polls also has him on the positive side of the ledger. All right, let's take a look. Trump's net approval rating on February 9th. Look at this. In 2025, he's at plus 4 points. Look where he was in 2017, his first term at this point. He was at -5 points, so he's doing nearly 10 points better on the average. And more than that, as I mentioned, it's not just the CBS News poll, it's the Ipsos poll, it's the Gallup poll, it's the Pew poll. All of these polls have him in better shape than those respective polls had him at this point back in 2017. So the bottom line is, no matter where you look, Donald Trump is more popular than he was 8 years ago at this point in his first term, and he's on the positive side of the ledger versus the negative side of the 0-point line as he was back in 2017.
And how rare is it that Trump's in this positive territory when it comes to his approval rating?
Yeah, I remember Donald Trump's first term, and it just seemed every single day Donald Trump was in the negative territory. And it turns out it was pretty much every single day of his first term. Positive net approval rating for Donald Trump, again, using the aggregate of the polls. Look at this. In his entire first term, just 11 days was he on the positive side of the ledger. Compare that so far, every single day, all 20 days so far, he has been on the positive side of the ledger. So he has nearly doubled up the number of days in which he has a positive net approval rating from his first term. And we're only 20 days in. Every single day, Donald Trump has been in positive territory compared to just 11 days during his first term. The bottom line is, no matter which poll you look at, no matter what way you look at it, simply put, Americans like the job that Donald Trump is doing significantly more this time around than they did in his first term, when he just had 11 days in which he had a positive net approval rating compared to already nearly 3 weeks so far, Jessica.
Well, that's because this time around, President Trump is more focused on doing the things that he promised that he's going to do, right? He's doing a much better job at getting it done. Now, here's the thing about these numbers, okay? I believe these numbers would be much higher if it wasn't for the fact that some of these polls are probably rigged, to be honest with you, to try to bring down Trump's approval. But again, you have constant 24/7 derangement from the media. Could you guys imagine what his approval would be if the media was actually fair towards President Trump? If they were actually fair, right? If they weren't boohoo, whining, crying every single day, I think his approval would be in the 70s, in the 80s, right? To be honest with you. So at this point, I think President Trump's real approval is actually much higher than the polls suggest.
That is pretty incredible to compare those two. So break this down then. Why, do you have any idea why more Americans are approving of his job, of the way he's doing his job this time around?
Yeah, of course, Donald Trump won the 2016 election. He won the 2024 election. But when you went into his first term, there were a lot of folks who simply put did not think that Donald Trump was doing what he promised. Back in April of 2017, it was just 46%. Compare that to 70% so far. So a big reason why Donald Trump is significantly more popular now than he was at this point in his first term is because, simply put, the American people believe he is fulfilling his campaign promises in a way that they did not believe he was doing, believed he was getting off on the wrong track back in 2017. They believe he's following his campaign promises this time around. And that is, I believe, a big reason why so many more Americans are approving of the job that he's doing compared to his first term at this point.
Wow, imagine that. Imagine that. A president doing what he promised he was going to do on the campaign trail, and the people liking it, rewarding him for doing it. Wow. Wow. This seems like a foreign concept in the United States because we're so used to politicians promising to do a bunch of things that they're not going to do, right? Like, for example, we're so used to the Paul Ryans of the Republican Party promising to do everything that Trump said he's going to do, or that Trump is doing right now when it comes to dismantling the nanny state, the administrative state, and giving more power back to the states when it comes to a lot of these functions of the federal government, but they never do it, right? They never do any of this stuff. They don't cut unnecessary spending. They don't do any of this stuff. They just talk it, okay? That's what the Paul Ryans of the world do, okay? That's what the establishment Republicans do. And lo and behold, this is why the American people don't really approve of the establishment Republicans. Same thing with Democrats. Democrats promise they're going to do a whole bunch of stuff they don't end up really doing. So yeah, when you have a guy in office, whether you agree or disagree with him, you have to respect the fact that he is doing the things that he promised that he was going to do. And that's what you're seeing showing up in the polls. And that is what gives President Trump his power at this point. It is the people, okay? That's what Democrats don't understand. As long as his approval rating is positive, as long as the people approve of his agenda, he's going to win. He's going to continue to win. And that's the one thing that, again, is holding President Trump accountable is the people. So when people say, well, Trump's not accountable and blah, 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 blah. No, he is. Trump wants to be a popular president. He wants the approval of the people. He knows that is his main source of power. And that's why he's doing what he's doing right now, because he knows that the people approve of it. That regular, normal, everyday Americans, regardless of your political affiliation, don't like their taxpayer dollars being spent on liberal pet projects and wasting money on things that are unnecessary. Yeah, the American people want a more efficient government that works for the people. And if President Trump is making efforts to do that, it doesn't matter how controversial the cut is. If the American people feel like it is wasteful, they're going to side with the president. And the Democrats, in their blanket opposition to these cuts that the president is making, okay, in order to save taxpayer dollars from wasteful spending, it's just a bad look. It's a really bad look on their part. And that's what they don't understand. They're better off trying to work with the president, at least pretend as if they care about making the government more efficient and not wasting taxpayer dollars. But that's not what they care about. What they care about is power and control. And President Trump right now is cutting off the funding for their power and control. And this is why they're lashing out. And they just look really silly. They're exposing themselves to the American people. And this is why their approval continues to go down while President Trump's approval continues to go up. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.